Okay, hello everyone again and salam به همه. Welcome to our today's online session. خوش آمدین به برنامه امروز. So our today's session will be like we are some almost 16 people in this giant session room, and some of our friends and colleagues are sitting in Porsesh office, and some of our friends will see us from live in Facebook. So I want to start it officially, if there is no problem and if everyone is ready. Okay. So as much as roads are key to a country infrastructure, data is critical infrastructure for today's life. Without better open data, we cannot achieve development, transparency, and better political processes. Open data is the idea that some data should be freely available to everyone to use and republish as they wish, without restrictions from copyright, patent, or other mechanisms of control. The philosophy behind open data has been long established, but the term open data itself is recent, gaining popularity with the rise of internet and World Wide Web, especially with the launch of open data government initiatives. One of the most important forms of open data is open data government data, which is a form of open data created by ruling government institutions. Open government data's importance is born from its being a part of everyone's everyday's life of citizens, down to the most routine tasks that are seemingly far removed from government. Based on a global data index review, Afghanistan received 12 score and ranked 84 in global ranking. Afghanistan government open data mainly covers 4 themes, which are government budget, procurement, national laws, and company registration. Due to the importance of open data, today is marked as International Open Data. Luckily, this year, Porsesh Research and Studies Organization celebrate this day by organizing the current event to talk more about the data and this open data. So today I have two humble and inspired data experts as a guest with me, and of course some other friends who are experts of data. But I want to introduce my guests who are going to speak today. My first guest is Ms. Cesare Panade. I hope I pronounce it in a good way, in a right way. Ms. Panade is the head of policy at Europol's Center of European Expertise. Cesare has an LLM degree in human rights from the Central European University. She developed policy proposal on the topic of artificial intelligence and ethics together with the students from College of Europe and Sciences Po Paris in order to tackle bias and discrimination caused by AI algorithms. She has won Public Choice Award. And my second guest is Mr. Ahmed Wali Ahmedyar. Ahmed Wali is a PhD researcher at Very University Brussels, collaborating with the Interface Demography Research Group. He works on the Horizon 2020 project enhanced migration measures from a multidimensional perspectives. His research focuses on international migration, the integration of migrants, migration data, theoretical and data gaps in migration research, EU policies on migration and migrant integration policies at the local level. Previously, Ahmed Wali worked for almost 3 years at the Center for European Policy Studies in Brussels and Economic Policy. Thanks for accepting the invitation, and again, welcome to today's event. So at first point, we will have 10 to 15 minutes for each of our speakers to share their points and present their thoughts with us. Thank you very much. Ms. Cesare, you can start.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me today. I'm very glad to discuss these important topics with you all, and I hope I can bring another perspective on how I see the importance of data, especially related to technology and how it can safeguard democracy and human rights. My main area of expertise is related to artificial intelligence and human rights, so I would like to tackle this issue with regard to the importance of data in promoting so many aspects of our lives, because we see that now technology is part of our lives, is part of having us enabled to have this call together. And I would like to tackle a few issues in this regard, and especially how data is important for human rights advocacy at large. So now I would like to share my presentation, and I hope it works. Just let me know if you can see it. Is it fine?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. But I want to make it full screen. So in my expertise, I'm working especially related to digital policies and influencing good policy making. And for that, I think an important aspect is related to data and implementing it for the good of society. Just because my focus is on artificial intelligence, I won't talk in great detail about it, but just a few mentions about how AI is present in our societies, and it's having a great impact on everyday life, because data is used to have a lot of inputs for having decision-making results. And through the selection of the algorithms, we are seeing information everywhere in our news feeds and getting information in our applications. I would like to emphasize just a few applications of AI in, for example, in criminal justice sector. It's very important to see that if data is biased or if there are some problems, because some jurisdictions use AI algorithms to predict the likelihood of recidivism or to establish the sentence that people should have. I think it's very dangerous for human rights and for democracy at large. In the healthcare system, we've seen that lately with the pandemic now, the AI applications are used to increase the productivity of offering medicine treatment and patient monitoring. And in the employment sector, that we see nowadays, AI algorithms are used to recruit candidates and to rank them higher or less, but that can also pose a risk for people's rights. So because I said that the main human rights critique is related to discrimination and bias, I just say a few words about how in our society, race, gender, sex, ethnic origin, or age can be criteria used to determine or to have an impact on getting some results. AI is considered to have a more objective approach, but it has two main issues that can lead to discrimination. For example, AI filters, AI algorithms are called black box because they cannot be properly tested before using, and they are opaque in that sense. But here the solution is to increase the transparency of the algorithms to increase better protection for human rights. And at the same time, the previous biases that might be included in the training of the data sets can be reproducing societal predispositions. And here we can increase the quality of data. Just because I mentioned earlier that freedom of expression and access to information are a crucial part of our lives. And we see that, for example, on social media, content is filtered and selected for every user depending on the data that they have published on their social media accounts. And that can be influencing how they see the world, how they perceive information, and how they get to see some specific news that can be of a political point of view. And I think it's important to have an unbiased and a clear view on how AI impacts our interaction with the applications, and to see that, for example, the content that we see might not be, for example, neutral. It might be selected in relation with our interests, because the social media platforms are selecting several interests that they have perceived about us. They might not be real, and therefore they use them to profile us and to target us with specific content or with micro-targeted political content to especially to influence us to take a specific political decision. And I think at large, if we see the danger that it has for free elections and for freedom of thought when we are influenced to read some articles or to inclusively to add some friends on Facebook. That is not free will that we are having on social media, and data that is collected about us and it's controlled, it has a great influence on how we see every piece of information online. Just because we cannot talk about data without touching upon privacy. I think we should be mindful that algorithms are using big data sets. And for example, there are several standards of respecting privacy and data protection. For example, in Europe, we have the GDPR, the General Regulation on Data Protection. And it enhances the protection that we have for data privacy. So that is a really good standard, and we are seeing that other states are trying to impose the rules on privacy, because after the Cambridge Analytica scandal that happened a few years ago, companies try to increase the level of protection worldwide for their users in order to don't allow manipulation of political behavior or voting behavior and to influence elections. And I think we cannot talk about privacy without putting it in context with political decisions, because some states might use the data of their citizens to have better insights of their political behavior, their political wills, and try to have an influence on that as well. We've seen how the AI algorithms were used in applications to track the COVID-19 pandemic, and I think for democracy, that's it's a crucial point when we need to see what a government can do and cannot do in regard with safeguarding our fundamental rights. And I think here advocacy is a key cornerstone for citizens and for civil society organizations to stand up for their rights and try to increase transparency at government level. Just a bit more information about how governments tackle the COVID-19 pandemic, especially in relation to data and access to information. I think it's crucial to say that handling the crisis, the public health crisis, many states imposed internet shutdowns and limited the access to information for their citizens on health measures and crucial medical assistance. And therefore the right to life even of their population was threatened. And also for journalists and whistleblowers, healthcare personnel, freedom of expression was infringed, and there were also faced reprisals attacks for journalists and or media workers. And in multiple countries, there was adopted state of emergency legislation that contravened with international commitments on safeguarding human rights. So I think we need to have a strong position on that and to put human rights at the first level of protection that we can address. Just a bit of international human rights norms on how we should safeguard privacy, freedom of expression, non-discrimination, and other human rights. We also have legally binding norms at the international level, and they are all applicable to algorithms and their effects. So there are also regional approaches to AI ethics, because it was said that before that we have also hard law imposed on the things that are important to algorithms and artificial intelligence. We need to have also a level of protection that is more like soft law, and we have principles of AI ethics that impose that algorithms should be trustworthy, they encompassing that they should be legal and robust and ethical, and also that at the EU level we have many aspects related to human rights centered AI with increasing transparency, accountability, responsibility, or non-discrimination. And then I want to see how we can ensure safeguards for fundamental rights and accountability for companies, but also for governments. And I would like to end up with saying that technology isn't good or bad, it's neutral, and it's up to us how we design it, how we implement it. What do we want from our governments? We want to have open data policies that will improve policymaking, but also the resilience of democracies. And what do we want to have as a civil society, as NGOs or international human rights organizations? What is our claim and how do we want to promote that? For the occasion of Open Data Day, I think it's important to talk about how governments are using citizens' data, how we can use that for good policy making, but without the risk of surveillance. Surveillance is more related to how states can use the data of their population to have a lot of information and not exactly to protect privacy or fundamental rights. It's very dangerous when states might abuse the data that they have on citizens, on population. And I think there are different roles for the stakeholders in the society, not just from civil society, but also from private companies, from academia to conduct research and to improve policies and to ask for international cooperation on that. And we need to see what are the global stakes on international open data or a global governance framework for open data and improving this sector for increasing transparency and better policy making. I think that is my take on this, and I'm looking forward to receiving your questions after the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cesara. I think you just raised very important points and critical points. Of course, open data is very important for governments, NGOs, and private sectors in different way. And the issue of privacy and surveillance and the issue of, I think also fake news and manipulation is also another important issues that we can talk about. And of course, rule of open data for the human rights issues. And you just finished it very well by just talking something about the future of data. Thank you very much. And now we would like to hear from Mr. Ahmed Wali Ahmadiyar.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Cesara, for the very interesting presentation. Actually, it's very interesting to see how people of different field, different research area, they are using or trying to manipulate the AI, the new technology for their purpose and to study it from different angles. So today, I'm really very happy to be for the first time among a group of Afghan researchers where I'm also from Afghanistan and I haven't been there for many years, and I'm really excited to share my experience, to give some perspectives on the topic that I have been working here for a while now, and to share a bit of inspiration for the youth sitting there and see how research works here in Europe. So I don't have a presentation, and that is for a purpose, because I want to make it a bit tailored to the audience in Afghanistan, especially those who are interested on research, on data, how to use different sorts of data. And I didn't want it to derive your attention by making a presentation or anything, so I'm just going to make my points directly. I hope that would be fine for everyone. So what basically I'm going to talk about is very specific points on about having, or the importance of having accessible data for everyone. the ethics of using different sorts of data, the importance of having data for development, especially for a country like Afghanistan, and the importance of having data on migration, on different aspects of migration, and why it is important to have data on migration. So before I go to that, I just want to point out that nowadays many countries, many international organizations, they are collecting data, they are presenting data, they are projecting data. And the countries that have better data, the countries that provide better data are usually or traditionally the rich countries like Global North, Europe, Northern America, Australia, and these countries. While the reality is developing countries, or rather poor countries, they are more in need of data. They are more in need of having quality data, accessible data, in order to plan things better, in order to develop better. But unfortunately, looking into the policies and the priorities of the governments in developing countries, having data is in the bottom of their list, especially in the planning in Afghanistan and all of these. While the fact is, here in Europe, every single country is legally obliged to collect data. But unfortunately, looking into the data collection in Afghanistan, for many of the even ministries or for many of like the government institutions, giving some very brief and small statistics about, okay, we have this many migrants or this many returnees, they believe that is data. And that should be tackled. I mean, I really highly encourage my Afghan friends, Afghan researchers, to really advocate for having quality data, accessible data, to better improve. It's not only about migration, but overall having good quality data. My PhD here is focused on evaluating the quality and the accessibility of international migration data. So we are looking, and I have developed a methodology on how to evaluate the quality of data. So we look into, with the cooperation of international organizations like IOM, the United Nations, big universities. My project has 16 consortiums from all over the world, and we are trying to figure out how to improve the quality of open data that we have on migration. And we have made categories of different countries, which countries are having better data and which countries are not having better data. And then we also look into how we can compensate and improve these sorts of data. We have seen that recently a lot of focus have been given into having the new innovative data, which is also called big data. So we also see how big data can compensate, or because even some people believe that in some aspects, big data can replace traditional data, which is still a bit far, but some countries are already doing, like for example, in the Netherlands, the census data, or in Belgium, the census data is being, some of the surveys being replaced by the government data that they collect in their administrative day-to-day work. So meaning that as much as the countries get more developed, they have better possibilities of collecting data. And that is more important for, again, for the developing countries. And the other point that I want to make is that I personally focus on migration. And what I have been hearing a lot in Afghanistan is that they usually, people or general public, even government institutions, conclude migration into refugees, asylum seekers, returnees, and people like that. While the reality is, even in the developed world, migration is the main engine of development, economies, bigger economies, and all of these. So out of 272 million immigrants that we have around the world, which emerged only in last 3 decades, only 10% of them are refugees, asylum seekers, and this sort of migration. The other source or those sort of migrations that people really wanted to have them. Developed world is really competing now. Now we are working with the European Union here. They are trying to make new mechanisms on how to attract new people, new brains, new migrants, and how to balance their demographies. So these are the important aspects of migration that unfortunately have been a bit underestimated in Afghanistan. So if, for example, we focus on having proper policies on having better migration routes, facilitating migration for all for other people to come and invest, and also facilitate migration for the Afghans to go, not to go for good, but go and come back and be able to travel and to promote regional mobility, then all sorts of mobility have a huge impact on the economy, on the manufacturing, on the import and export. So everything is interrelated, but what I want to say is that for the youth, for the researchers, it's important to study migration as a field of study, as a discipline, not look at it into just writing some academic papers or articles, or looking at it as a phenomena that is just there for like as we see it, only like humanitarian migrants. But migration is a huge field, is the same as important as economics, for example, or as business or management and any other field. So migration should be really fundamentalized in Afghanistan. In the universities, we don't have migration studies programs, so this should be. And that's what I'm really looking forward, that one day we have in Afghanistan studying and promoting migration. And now talking about the migration data, unfortunately in Afghanistan, we don't collect data on migration, on different sources of migration. We don't have proper migration policies, except for some very specific statistics. When we talk about data or open data on migration, we don't talk about just the specific statistics or few numbers, but we talk about the demographic characteristics of these people, like age of these people, education of these people, gender of these people, where they are coming, where they are going, internal mobility, internal displacement, what are the potentials of these people. All of these sort of information are needed for planning of the country, basically. So these are the important aspects that have been totally neglected in developing countries. I know that the United Nations, especially the United Nations Economic and Social Affairs, they help the developing countries with presenting estimations on migration, but those estimations are just estimations. And that's important, that we should advocate for or pushing the government for collecting data and collecting quality of data. And what is remaining is that we know that big data can give a very good potential for us to manipulate data, to extract data, and to do that. But unfortunately, when it comes to countries like Afghanistan, it's always manipulated against people. How to, for example, reduce some political activities, how to shut up people, and how to do this. But that is very, very unfortunate that those sorts of usage are happening from big data, while it allows people. For example, a good example of big data that was used recently is that the United Nations, they collected data like traditional data. They did all the estimations, and after the estimations, we realized that we have 272 million immigrants around the world. But with the help of big data, other colleagues, they looked into big data from Facebook, and they had an estimation very close to ours. And it was it was very surprising for us that how big data could be to that extent accurate. So I know that now social media, Facebook, telecommunication is very much improving in Afghanistan. A lot of people are using it. So we can look into the potential of manipulating this sort of data for the development, for the good of people, not for, even we can use it for the security improvement, if there is a real good intention and if we really advocate for that. And then I have no more comments on this, but I would be really happy if you wanted to discuss with me personally how we could use data, how we are using data, which methods we are using, like which algorithms that we use. So all of these, I will be very, very happy to work with you, to guide you through, and also to explain you our project that we have. So these are all sorts of things that I am happy to help with you, because I have always had this dream to work with the people in Afghanistan, with the researchers, and to exchange experiences and allow them to use the opportunities that we have here in Europe. Thank you very much, and looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmadiar. I think you just raised very important issues, especially the issue of using data for migration, which I think GEMDoc, which is the database of IOM, is a very valuable thing, or a valuable data set for those who want to conduct research about migration. Besides that, I think one of the important issue that you raised is about the issue of access vs accessibility, which I think nowadays another big issue in terms of open data. Of course, we have access to some data sets, but it's also important that how we can use that data set, or how everyone can use that data set, which I think there are some more valuable works done in this side as well, like the global beliefs dataset. There is a website, a database about global values, and they just recently added the data analysis tools in their own website. So like, you didn't need to be a data analyst that you can use their data. You just can go there and they just tabulate data and did the correlation and regression for you. You just can use the data in a way that you want. So I think this is also another important issue. And also the issue of advocacy for data, I think it's very important that we have the multidimensional advocacy for data. It's not only about asking governments to share their data, it's also about asking governments to teach the students about the data and how they can use data and the importance of data, which is, I think, very important. Like, there are millions or billions of data today, but it's important that, like, how we can use this data. And of course, the issue of surveillance and fake news, or how the even terrorist groups use the manipulation, because I think this is the area that I did my researches. So like Emerson in his book Like Wars explained very well, like how ISIS used data and marketing strategy of Katy Perry to recruit more Europeans for ISIS, or how today Taliban use the Twitter data to frame their narratives. And they are very, very successful by using that one. So today data is of course important for anyone, even you're a terrorist and just attacking people, or even if you're a government organization or a company or an NGO. So there is no doubt in the importance of the data. Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmadiar. So now we can receive the questions. If anyone want to ask question, they just can raise their hand in here. And then downside, you can find the options of raising hand. And Ali John, please send me the messages or the question that someone asked from Facebook. Okay, now we have Mr. Shafai. Yes, the floor is yours. You can share your question.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, friends at Porsesh organization, for arranging such a great program. And of course, data is very important in Afghanistan. Historically, if we see Afghanistan, we see the time series data in the country. Unfortunately, we face lots of structural breaks. For example, if you want to see the trends of GDP in Afghanistan, So regularly, you do not have this time series for that. So it is not only the past. If we see now, for example, in the future, what we do, if we talk about sustainable development, for example, which is we are in the decade of action, and other countries are creating data of, around the SDGs. In Afghanistan, still we are in planning phase, unfortunately. So it indicates that after 2030, we may not have data again. So it is a big challenge in Afghanistan. And if we look to the capacity of the government, for sure they are not able to create data. So in the future also we have a dark, we will have dark days, especially the researchers when they want to do research in all aspects of socio-economics or whatever. So my question from the speakers are that beyond the government, how in Europe, the private sector, the think tank organization, the universities, private sector companies, what are their role in creation of data? Do you think, just share us your experience. Can think tank organizations or universities in Afghanistan also beside the government can take part in data creation so that we will not face such a problem which we have now in the future? Thank you very much.
How do we proceed? Do we answer both the question, or how?
Or have we received some more questions and then you answer them? Because
Okay.
maybe there are some replication, so we just can avoid the replication and having more time for the questions.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Shafiq Ahmad, I have a question, so you can ask your question.
All right. Thank you for the speakers, for everyone. My question goes to the risks associated with the privacy of with the data, open data, specifically. There are specific risks such as privacy infringement, risks of the security of the infrastructure, publication of improper data and information, publication of the inaccurate data, misinterpretation of the data, like as you mentioned, that the rival groups can misinterpret the data according to their well. Also, absence of data consumers. So what would you propose to mitigate the risks of open data? Thank you so much. I've pasted that question also on the
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the question. There's also another question from Mr. Ahmed Wali Ahmed Yar, and the question is about oh, sorry, let me find that. Yeah, is there anything done in regard to Afghanistan? I think they are asking about data collection about Afghanistan. Maybe it's specifically about migration. So just if I have a quick point, of course, there are some things done, both from government and also from the NGOs. Yeah, and any other questions? So it seems like there is no more question here in the Zoom, at least. So please go on and you can respond to the questions. Ms. Cesara or Ahmed Wali John, any of you can start it.
Okay, then I'll start. I'll be a bit brief, and I'll let Ahmed continue. My insights on how companies, at least in Europe, are using data is that we are having a quite the approach is that they collect data, they use it, but in a careful way, because they are restricted and required to use the regulations in place. And by time we are having, especially more and more privacy regulations, so that we don't have a control of a monopoly of data from companies, from private companies, because there are no, here I would like to make a point that privacy companies are not necessarily obliged to respect human rights. There is the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, but other than that, this is just a soft law, highly authoritative instrument on international human rights law. But how companies should respect human rights is not very clear. So I think private sector should work with academia and civil society to improve the use of data, because they can cooperate together. Academia needs data and they can do research on that, but they need to find out how to access more data. And I think Ahmad made a very valid point on developing countries and the need for more data, because we see the difference on global north, global south, and how developed countries use data, but there are not very many improvements on how many states still need to access data and to understand how to use that. And civil society, I think they are asking for more transparency and policy practices that would hold governments accountable on the way they use data at large. With regard to the second question on the risks associated to using these data sets and how we can mitigate those risks, I think we should have we should implement policies in practices that would increase the cooperation between stakeholders. I think from the companies that collect data to governments that also have data, but oftentimes there is no real exchange of best practices. More, for example, in my country, I think private sector is far more developed than the government on using technology. So I think if private sector can come with expertise and knowledge and technical skills on how we can use these data sets, and to teach governments, but also, as you said, Ali, I think about improving the research, and the government that should have an interest in teaching students and paying attention to what the researchers can do, and supporting them with funding and with scholarships, and with possibilities for learning about new techniques on using data. I think we can have a better implementation of technologies that are used by this that are using these data sets, and how can they be implemented in the society. But other than that, I think there are steps that we should take step by step, and then we can talk about more cooperation into that field. And I'm not very specific on the topic of Afghanistan, but I hope Ahmed can continue the topic and address these issues in more details. Thank you.
Thank you, Cesara. Ahmad-Jan, please go on.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's always very interesting to have the European perspective from Cesara, and then I link it a bit with Afghanistan. Actually, all of the three questions were very, very interesting. So I'm going to go through them one by one. So the first question was like, what could be like the role of public research institutions? Like what could, for example, Porsesh do in helping or supporting the country to have better data? Actually, last night I was reading something for one of our projects. Because we know that now the existing system in Afghanistan is pretty much close to the system in the US, because the recent development have been done a lot by the Americans. So if we look into America in the 1930s, 1920s, or even in the 1800s, we see that all the developments of collecting data started from public institutions. Private institutions, sorry, like universities. Like nowadays, University of Michigan is holding the biggest surveys and data sources of the United Nations, the United States government, because it's these sorts of organizations, universities, research institutions, that they know how to collect data, they know the value of data, and then they know how to develop data. And then it's less bureaucratic for them. One of the biggest concerns for collecting data in Afghanistan is the cost effectiveness of data. If a foreign organization. Like I was working for a Center for European Policy Studies here in Brussels, and if we wanted to have, for example, a research project in Afghanistan, it was very, very costly for us to hire people. Usually paying people in the ground is even most costlier than having someone hired here in Europe. So these things cannot be implemented from outside, or if the government want to do something, first of all, they don't have the expertise on that. Second of all, the government is corrupt, and then the work would go to nowhere. So that's why I believe that these initiatives by the NGOs and initiatives by the research organizations is of high importance. So to point out to the first question, and the second question is about the risk and all those sorts of things. So nothing comes without a risk. Having open data is also of high risk. But then let me tell you something. A couple of months ago, or I don't know, it was a couple of weeks ago, this app, WhatsApp, they announced a new policy, and all the world was freaking out at what is happening, because how they are going to use our data and all of these things. But while people, you living in the, I'm not saying that European Union is the best or everything is perfect here, but just to say in this case, that people in the European Union even didn't care about it, because here we have the GDPR, we have a system that does not allow like those sorts of companies to manipulate people's information the way that they want, or at least openly. So like if we have open data and beside that we have proper regulations, then it's fine. Like first comes the problem and then there comes the solution for it. It has been happening always. So in the aspect, let's first have the open data, and then when there is a problem, we will try to tackle that. Now big data is also something like that. I'm working on a project for the ethics of big data. Even people who works on the ethics of big data, they are even lost on how to like implement new rules to make it more humane and make it like ethically valid. So it's a process going on. So yeah, that is one thing. And also there was a question about a misinterpretation of data, how, or if in case people misinterpreted data. What I would say is that 3 months ago here in Belgium, they released data on COVID. And then all of a sudden, newspapers from the UK, from Australia, from everywhere, they were producing like news on like announcing that Belgium the champion of COVID, because the numbers was very high. It was showing that the mortality rate in Belgium was very, very high. And that was a kind of misinterpretation of data, because when they saw that the data and then they compare it with the other countries, they believed that that Belgium is the champion of COVID because there is a lot of mortality in Belgium. And then when the other statisticians, they correctly look into data, and then they saw that no, actually it's the problem with the other countries, how they count the data, and they have been wrong all this time. So it's Belgium who produced like proper data, and then within 1 week all those news reports were all taken back by those news channels. So now you can't find them because there was a misinterpretation. But then you see that if you have open data, someone misinterpreted, then there is another person to correct it always. So it's always not that okay, you can convince people with the open data. But yeah, if I have the data, for example, now the companies that they have the data on COVID, whatever they say, even if they misinterpret it, nobody knows that, and that is a problem. But if the data is out there and you can use it for yourself and I can use it for myself and see the results, then everything is clear. So that is that one. And then there was a third question about data collection in Afghanistan. It was also previously mentioned that actually from a government perspective, first of all, it's not in the priority. Second of all, the government does not have the expertise of people who work there to know what is a good quality data. And that is a problem. They don't know the definition of having better data. For them, data is only some very specific statistics that they announce and they come to the media and they are proud of it. But that is have been happening. And as I mentioned, the United Nations is helping Afghanistan with some estimations, but then again, their estimations, they are not accurate data. You cannot make relevant policies from those sorts of data. So yes, and then all these questions link to each other. It goes back to the first question that here it comes the role of research institutions, that they have to help each other and collect better data, even if the government is trying to escape this responsibility.
Thank you very much. Well, I just wanted to add some points in terms of the privacy. I think the first issue or misusing of the data. I think there is a very big issue, and that big issue is that we still don't have too much focus on that. We just like maybe one of the shocking things, the reality about the privacy issue is that maybe you don't know that, but the biggest violators of the data are the humanitarian organizations and the UN organizations. So if I want to explain it, like if everyone knows that the most private and the most sensitive data is our biometric, and if you are as an asylum seeker and if you just want to go in a country and apply for asylum, then they ask you for your biometric data. And after when like you just received your even citizenship, but still you don't know that what they did with your data. So it's like a big issue of violation, and that's coming from humanitarian and UN agencies. So it's a very, very valid question, and there are many, many organizations that are going to answer that. Also, the way that China doing during the COVID, like they are asking people to just taking the blood pressure. Like I think Harari raised a very, very important issue on his topic in his books and also on his article, that he said, okay, before that you can find out that what I'm going to do in the next 5 years, but now even you can find out that what are my emotions, with surveilling my kind of blood pressure and also knowing about my chemical things of activities of my body. So I think that's very, very important issue and very dangerous, and it's something that about the future of data that we should consider it. And also in terms of data in Afghanistan, I think the government, at least in the global index of open data website, you can find at least 4 specific data set of the government. Here you can find the data about the budget, national budget. You can find data about procurement, data about business registration. And of course, there are NGOs or INGOs that are working very well in this regard. I think Masood John and Fahim John are here from the Asia Foundation, that they have a very kind of valid database and comprehensive database about Afghanistan, which of course I will ask Masood John later to talk about it as well. And also, I personally started in 2019 with a group of friends, a data mining company, which unfortunately due to some problems, we cannot continue it, but data mining can be also part of not only NGOs, it can be a kind of business, and some countries can, you started data mining, which is the same thing that social media companies did. Like one of the main incomes of social media companies is coming from data mining, and they just make lots of money for it, billions of dollars from data mining. And well, yeah, that's the issue with that one. And of course, in terms of misinterpretation, I think this is $1 million question for the world and for everyone who is working with the data, because in the last centuries, we all receive vaccines without asking any question. But now Germany faced with serious challenge because people didn't use AstraZeneca vaccine, and because of the data and because they know more about vaccine today. So also there are some articles that I read recently, and they said like the most biggest threat of freedom of speech now is not the dictators, it's about the data and how we are going to interpret the data or how we are going to manipulate the data. So it's a kind of, again, I say there's some kind of $1 million question, and it's the question that the future should respond to that, that how we are going to avoid misinterpretation of the data or manipulation of the data. Yes, and now I would like to ask Masujon to share their points because they asked us to have some points about it. And then later we will come to Mr. Shafoi. Masujon?
Yeah, I was muted. Hello, everyone. It's very nice to see a lot of familiar faces. So I wanted to share a few maybe experiences about developing a culture of where people actually decide, make decisions, make policies based on data. And for those who we haven't met, I have been involved in the nonprofit sector, primarily with the Asia Foundation, and currently I work at the private sector with Moody's Analytics, which is basically the business is a $5 billion business built on financial data. So I would like to maybe share about like a little bit of experiences how this data can be used, but I want to make it on the context of Afghanistan in 3 minutes, basically. So I think we are all very much at least involved in data in various areas. We have experts in artificial intelligence, we have researchers, and we have maybe practitioners, professors. So all of you are familiar. I think we don't need to, I don't see myself in the position to talk about like importance of data, but I would like to focus on how we can actually like have an impact on our society. And this is coming from someone who has helped teach some students and also practitioners to use data. So I think what we missed on today's topic was the way how to kind of improve that, how to make data more available for public use. And I think there was a mention of using very nice dashboards on some certain organizations where you don't need to know statistical knowledge. You just point and click, and that's one of the best examples of how we can make it more available. I think, in my opinion, we need to develop an understanding that what data is capable of doing. So we need to know how much value it can add, and we need to know, we need to teach others that there is this value added if we use data properly. So in that sense, like in the context of Afghanistan, this is very small. So traditionally, we are making decisions based on our maybe experiences, but also like our personal experiences and biases, and that's very dangerous. And that kind of decision making does not lead to better outcomes necessarily. So partly because we don't know, those decisions could be made better and more informed using some data sources. But also there is partly there is lack of trust in the data, that actually the data is correct or not, and it's collected correctly. And the other is, even if someone wants to use the data, they wouldn't be able to use the data because they don't know how to use it. So here we need to talk about, I think, as people who are like involved in this, to focus on developing skills. So if you're working with people in the country, in Afghanistan, in the areas, you need to, first of all, talk about the importance, and then we should talk about how to use it. So like just teaching them some simple software to start doing some simple tabulations, getting some frequencies and percentages is very empowering. So I personally started doing this, started my journey and started writing like first line of code when I was 25 years old. And that was very transformative, because when I wrote first line of code and I saw that what I could find from the data, it just stuck to me that I wanted to do this always. So, and then from there, I spent, I guess, many years looking at blogs, on the internet, but there was this initial spark in me that I actually wanted to continue doing this. And this led me to, I think I developed a kind of a successful career as a practitioner. And I was also very much motivated by this learning experience. I wanted to transform it or give it to others. And I think this is important, that we should learn and we should give others and empower others. So Afghanistan is at this stage that we need to help others to realize what data can do. We don't, in my opinion, we don't lack data. Yes, we lack data compared to Europe, developed countries, but we don't lack data proportionate to the number of users. So we have very few users, but we have massive amounts of data. And if we have time and we have users, I think we can do a lot of good research. We can make good policy making. We can have, journalists can write relevant stories. So this is very important. And how we can do this is teaching them and also making tools that are very easy to use. So dashboards is the best example. So if you're able to if you're working on a data and if you can make it public, and today, because of Open Data Day, we should talk about making data public and open. So we should make it public and open by creating dashboards, visualizations that are easy for people to understand, and helping people to get that initial spark that I experienced it, and maybe most of you also experienced it. So this was, I hope that helped you kind of shared my experience in a few words. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, we can be in touch.
Thanks, Mr. John, but it was like 3 minutes. Okay,
Yes.
but thank you very much. So we are almost at the end of the session. I think the speakers maybe have some other commitments and some other things to do. So just as I know, of course, there are too many questions, but if the speakers want, we can have some more questions. Otherwise, I wanted to ask the speakers to have their final comments.
I don't have any final comments or anything. I just want to thank the organizers one more time. And as I mentioned before, I would be open to your questions. I would ask the organizers if they could share the contacts to the participants here in case they wanted to have. I'm also very interested in what is Masood doing, so it would be great to talk about it further.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Ari.
So thank you so much for having me. I'm not a data scientist, or my experience with data is from a policy perspective and a legal one, especially related to human rights. And I know I'm not, my particular expertise is not on Afghanistan and the particular issues that might be very important for you all, but at least I hope I could shed some light on the European perspective and to try to exchange some practices that are in Europe in place, and that I think that might be useful for developing countries as well. And I think they might help you in developing a strong safeguards for data and using in a respectful way for human rights. And I'm happy to be in touch with you all, and thank you so much for the opportunity. And I think and I hope you can collaborate and work together further on having an impactful activity on the work on open data in Afghanistan.
Thank you very much, Cesare. Of course, you have very valuable and insightful points for today's session. And thank you very much for everyone for coming. And thank you very much again for Porsesh to organize such important event. I think this important event was very important, and I hope we can have more of a series of this kind of events about the data and importance of the data, because this is what the future will shape based on that. So again, thank you very much. And if there is no final comment from Ehsan part, then we will finish today's event. Or Shagan Saib, you have something to say?
Not too much, but I just want to thank the speakers and as well as the participants for the wonderful presentations and as well as for the questions. And that's it. I hope this series continues, and we should have more speakers from around the globe for next sessions. Thank you so much, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good time, and bye.